Welcome to Rise, Season 3, Episode 10. From Switzerland, where a recent study found that in the 2 weeks since restaurant terraces, museums, and other leisure venues opened, there has been no statistically significant increase in the number of infections. I am Professor Demian Hodari of EHL Lausanne.
And from lovely London, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us in the world. Thank you for joining us for the first episode of the second year of Rise. We're very excited to have you back, and it's incredible because the past 2 weeks have been incredibly important for our industry, travel, tourism, and hospitality. Why? Because just 2 weeks ago, the EU announced openness to non-essential international travel from June from travelers all over the world, as long as they can show that they are fully vaccinated with EU and WHO approved vaccines. This is supported by the EU's digital passport, which is going to be put through in terms of fast tracking it for the end of June activation, going through the European Parliament. And as we know in the UK, we've got red, yellow, and green traffic lights for countries in terms of regulations moving in and out. So very exciting. A lot of countries in the world, the skies are blue, the skies are opening. However, we are not through the storm yet, because we know whether it's India, Brazil, the Seychelles, so many countries around the world, the skies are still incredibly dark and the hurt is still there. So we need to look at this, as we always do on Rise, as a global problem needing a global solution. And that's why Rise is here as a global show for you. We have a fun one today, because again, it's one of those I never thought of that programs to see how the travel, tourism, and hospitality world and its challenges is impacting different industries. Please do send us any questions you might want to know from in terms of the subject of working from home. What the? Because clearly that's not going away, even when COVID-19 does. And Demian's going to explain more. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I guess that means working from home. What's the future? So we've all been working from home, eating at home, cooking, trying to keep our kids educated and entertained at home. And in this process, I think we've all changed drastically or in many different ways. The way we view ourselves, the way we view our work, the way we view our homes. So we thought we'd take a look at residential real estate today and understand a little bit, how has this changed? And more importantly, how is this going to change based on the trends that we've all been enacting over the past year? We've got a great, perfect guest for that a little bit later. And as always, we'd like to explore this topic first with you. So we've got the following question for our first poll of the day. What excites you most about returning to your workplace or campus? Let's see those results, Anita.
Wow.
So, right, colleagues. It's all about colleagues, in-person collaboration, seeing colleagues, and for me, this is right on. If you remember from one of the videos we had last week, or 2 weeks ago, last episode, from our past executives and residents helping us celebrate the first year, my brother, actually, Jamie, mentioned that in their work on office rentals, the key thing they found was people want to go back to work because they want to see their colleagues. It's not about productivity. It's not about efficiency or being away from home. It's about the colleagues. So our audience seems to be right on with that as well.
But I'm intrigued, though, because if we were to add another option in there, Demian, asking our Wizards of Oz what is really exciting them about being able to meet you in person and meet you in person, I think establishing that you actually do exist in 3 dimensions would be the answer. So huggability matters. Let's see what happens.
Yeah, and nobody put not excited. So everybody's excited for something to go back to office or school. So that's great.
Stunning. So where in the world are we? As we're saying, it's an interesting time in these last few days. Where are we as of May the 10th? I cannot believe, Demian, that we're into May already. So from my side, some stats I thought that were interesting. Very, very keen to see what's happening with McKinsey & Company. They surveyed 800 leaders to ask, in the next 2 years, what is the nature of hiring that you're actually going to be engaging with? When it was offline, people working still remotely, a little bit of in terms of we'll be doing a bit of hiring, but I love the fact that 70% of executives suggest that they wanted to hire on-site temporary workers and freelancers. I thought this was amazing from the point of view of people getting back into work. It's the opportunity to gain access to new work, to try out new roles, because a lot of people have been rethinking about what they want to do when they go back to the offices, and easing back into the workplace. It allows people to get used to wearing not pajamas from the waist down. So I thought this was very inspiring. Demian, I know you have an interesting thought on this.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't shared it with you yet, but we've had a lot of issues in the industry and related industries with temporary workers, with freelancers, contractors not receiving many of the same benefits or conditions as full-time employees. So I'm just hoping that we are going to see, especially in our industry, you'll see some of the data I have later, if we go this route, that we're recognizing these people for the value that they're bringing and not just as a way to keep costs down in terms of benefits and packages. So I'm a little bit more cautious about the optimism that you are expressing about this.
Yeah, just being a grouch, but that's usual. That's fine.
That's who I am.
And then we go to the next one. And again, this is about a trend that people thought might go back to the old ways. But as we've said, it's about the next normal, not even the new normal. And this is looking at from a retail point of view and people's buying habits. I thought this was fascinating in how if we look at people's use of online retail during the COVID period, and as we've gotten used to the lockdown, lock in, go back out, shops are open. Interestingly, this is fascinating from the point of view of companies needing to make sure that their clicks and their bricks are aligned in brand delivery, in service quality, customer service, and experience, both online and in the retail shopping environment tangibly. What I find interesting as well is that if companies are going to now need to make sure that their online offerings are at par or if not better than the shopping environment, what does that mean for commercial real estate? Interesting question, and we've got the perfect guest for it. I thought this was really fascinating.
Yeah, really interesting. So part of my grouchiness about that piece of data you shared was based on some research that was done out of Florida Atlantic University with Peter Ritchie and his colleagues, and they've put out some of the data, which I took the liberty of sharing with our audience today. First piece of data, 13.5% of the 4,000 employees that they interviewed around the world say that the industry is going to protect its employees from losing their jobs in the event of a crisis. That means 86.5% do not think that, right? So not a really positive view of the industry's treatment of its people from its people. Almost 50% express concern regarding the continuance of their work in the long term, meaning will there be a job for them and will they be able to fulfill that job? And then if we just click one time, we see another piece of data, which I think is particularly interesting. Next year, I will probably look for a new job outside the hospitality and tourism industry. Anita, I'm going to ask you, I haven't shared this with you yet. What percentage of these 4,000 people do you think are saying, you know what, I got to get out of this industry?
Yeah, I hate to say it, but I will say my estimate is at least a third.
At least a third. Let's see what those numbers are, Jessica. So entry level, line level workers, there you go, just over a third. And even at the managerial level, it's a quarter. And we see this already in the establishments that are having a tough time finding people to return to work and staff their hotels and restaurants. And this is just going to have a direct impact on labor costs. So all the establishments that were thinking they found these new efficiencies throughout the pandemic to reduce their labor costs, they're actually finding labor costs are going up, even with reduced number of jobs. So not a great scenario for anybody right now. And hopefully this research that they've done and more of the data they're going to release will spur the industry to recognize changes have to be made.
Great stats, thank you.
And I am advocating my second piece of data today to Jan Freitag from our partners at STR. Jan's got a really interesting perspective for our audience about data analysis, and the hotel industry. So over to Jan.
Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Rise, I hope you are well and on your way to get vaccinated as well. Hello, Anita, good to see you again. And thanks, Demian, for having me back. Today, I want to spend 3 minutes on a very quick deep data dive on how the sausage is made. We're getting a lot of questions about how to interpret our data, and I thought it might be helpful for your audience to sort of follow along on this journey. Last week in the United States, RevPAR increased 187%. what does that even mean, right? Super hard to make sense out of these triple-digit changes just because the comparables are so easy compared to 2020. So let me show you the March data, and that basically has the same pattern, right? April, single worst month we ever recorded. Now in March, compared to the March of 2020, RevPAR is up 34%. Again, a little bit hard to parse if you recall, RevPAR changes are normally in the +2 to -2 range. So 34 is quite an outlier, and it's very positive, but what does it really mean? So then clients are asking us, hey, can you just compare the current data to the 2019 data? And of course we can, and that's what the second slide shows. So what we're doing here is not looking at year over year, but looking at the same data point compared to 2019. And what you're seeing here is a much smoother recovery curve, right? That the data was 80% off and 70% off, and now it's 30% off. And we hopefully get closer to quote-unquote normal to 2019 levels soon. But keep in mind that 2019 was the best year ever, right? So what some of our clients are doing, they're actually taking the average of 2017 through 2019 and take that as normal and then compare the 2021 data compared to that normal. So that's another way of looking at the data. Let me share with you a third one, which is indexing. And what I'm showing you on this chart here is that we're taking a week in 2019 and we look at the occupancy and we're setting it at 100. Just as an index, we're saying it's 100. And then we're looking at today, the last week, which is May the 1st, what does the index look like? And you can see it's 82 point something percent, 82.8%. This is not the occupancy. It doesn't mean that in that week the occupancy was 82.8%. It means that compared to an index of 100, the occupancy was still quite a bit below what it was. But what I like about this chart is that in the 4-week average, you can easily track the trajectory of recovery and how the occupancies are getting better and better and better compared to that same week in 2019. So indexing is a third way of looking at the data right now that a lot of our clients are using. Wow, okay, so that was a really deep dive into data methodology. You got some actual data, so yes, the data continues to do well, and the hotel industry continues to do well. But I thought it was interesting and sort of share with you this insight into different ways of interpreting this data, of looking into the data to make the most sense out of it. So I hope this was helpful. Thank you very much for having me back. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Until then, stay safe. Bye-bye.
Yeah, thank you, Jan. You know what I took away from that, Anita? Maybe probably not the most important thing in Jan's mind was what was this idea of averaging 2017 to 2019. That's something that would not have occurred to me. He's bringing that from the industry. This is what the industry is doing with it, which actually I can use in my class. So really, really valuable for me at least.
And so you know what I love about that as well, because we don't request from Jan exactly what to speak about. And we've always said from the beginning, Demian, that we want this to be a place where people can make sense of what's going on. We don't only have hospitality viewers around the world. We've got tourism, we've got aviation, we've got destinations. So it's great that he's taking the lingo that many people understand and helping those who don't figure it out. So I thought that was really smart from the point of view of just let's all move together in understanding whether it's the context, but even just the content. So Jan, thank you very much. And he's been a real sweetie doing this.
Yeah, I like that you called him a sweetie. Okay, I called him other things. So we got a couple of headlines for you from the last couple of weeks. My first one
is my first one.
No.
First one.
Where are you? Comes from the New York Times. A $7 billion mistake. New York seeks to curb new hotels. I thought this was really interesting because there's a plan in the New York City government to require strict approval for every new hotel that's being proposed. Usually this kind of approval is only required of things that are going to drastically change the city, historic buildings or huge complexes, sports stadiums, et cetera. And they're saying, let's do this for hotels. And on the one hand, okay, maybe it'll preserve local communities a bit more because the data that they've got it saying, hotels disrupt or change a community much more than a normal business, changes traffic flow, consumption, rents, et cetera. You'd think that labor unions would be against this because less jobs, but in fact, most new hotels in the city have ended up being these limited service hotels that don't have a lot of services, don't have banqueting, don't have events, and don't need a lot of employees. So the unions are actually, it seems like, in favor of this because it'll require hotels to really to provide jobs. But then within the government, there are people saying, wait, this is going to reduce tax income for the city if we don't have more hotels and if we don't generate higher occupancies and more visitors to the city. And I just think it's really interesting, not necessarily because it's related to the pandemic, because maybe we can start to look beyond that, but just the complexity and the way governments and businesses and other stakeholders have to be working together to push the industry forward. But again, this theme that we've looked at before, local communities, keeping them, preserving them. We saw that with Amsterdam, and we're going to see that in a couple of weeks with city tourism, with New York and some other places. So I thought that was a pretty interesting headline. And then I've got a second one, short-term rental company Sandor to go public via a special SPAC at $2.2 billion valuation. And my basic point here is everybody keeps talking about Airbnb. They are not the only player out there, right? Sonder only runs 300 units, but they're a huge player, and not just in terms of revenue, but also in terms of influence on the industry. And I think this long-term that we've been seeing move towards people liking to rent these short-term rentals, these apartments and houses, that was so drastically accelerated throughout the pandemic. And we're going to see this playing out for a long term. So the hotels that have been saying this is a fad, it's not really a big trend, I think they've been recognizing for a while and now really have to recognize, especially as you see players like Marriott and Hyatt getting into this business more strongly, that this is really here to stay. It's a competitor to hotels, but it's a great possibility and choice for consumers. And it is going to impact the residential and real estate market. And I want to talk about that with Andrew in a little while as well. So,
brilliant.
Over to you.
Choices. Thank you very much. My choices go straight to travel and tourism, and I thought this was fascinating. May the 1st until the 5th was the May Day holidays in China. 230 was the final count. 230 million people traveled around China. What's fascinating about this, firstly, it was domestic tourism only. The government did not allow any international travel, purely domestic. Think of the value and supply chains that get mobilized by that. That is remarkable. Importantly, 75% was by road, about 20% of it was by rail, and then there was a little bit mix of air and water. But it's fascinating to see that they were up 119% compared to last year, 3% up versus 2019. People clearly, we've talked about that pent-up demand, whatever language we want to use. What is at the heart of this? Heart before holiday. People are missing their families and friends, and they have been desperate to reconnect. And we saw that. So it'll be interesting to see how comfortable people felt getting back out again. Because again, we've all been rewired to stay away, stay home, keep your hands clean, and stay with Rise. So interesting to see what happens. My second headline links very much as well to our executive in residence today. I don't think we've ever been so honoring of our executive in residence, Demian, with our choices. But I thought this is fascinating, that the whole work from home phenomena, it's put people in a position of really questioning the quality of their lives. We've all been grounded, and now we found ways of working and living and playing in the same relatively small space. And many people are saying, even though offices might be opening at the end of the year, they don't want to deal with the commutes. They don't want to deal with the lost time. They don't want to deal with the lost family contact. So we've got these Zoom towns popping up around the world where people are choosing to live, not forced to live because of offices. I find this is fascinating. Equally, with people being stuck with domestic travel, holiday homes are now being increased in terms of people spending the money they would have spent outside into buying a place on the coast, in the vineyards, wherever that might be. All of this puts a big question mark. What does this mean for the residential travel market and for the residential property market? I thought this was really, really interesting. And again, going straight into our lovely exec in residence. For my video choice, I'm gonna get a little bit more serious on this. This is a campaign that was launched in the last 2 weeks, which I thought was just spectacular. Because as much as we are buoyant and we're optimistic, and I've got my rose-colored glasses on, it's been hard for a lot of people. And their presentation of themselves to the outside world is a major disconnect from who they actually are and how they feel about themselves. Dove put this out, and I thought this was really important in terms of helping people ease back into the real world when what people have been seeing of us is not the same as we've projected for the last 15 months. Because Demian, we all know now, when you're lecturing from home, you don't have any shoes on.
Hey, as the father of two teenage daughters, I thought that was a great video, and I'm looking forward to sharing that with them tonight. So good job, Anita.
Thank you.
We have a poll, second poll for our audience, and then we're going to bring on our guest. So our second poll asks the following. What have you liked most about working or studying from home? Please choose just one of the following. And our results show that
Wow.
flexibility and time management. I gotta say, I agree. Although I'm really, as you know, happy with the relaxed dress code as well. So
Sweet.
probably
Really
would've mentioned.
valuable. I think it's great. I love these polls because they give us such a great sense of what people are thinking and feeling in the moment, and we don't know what the reaction is going to be. So very cool. Thank you, everyone.
Very helpful.
Excellent. And we now go into our executives in residence. And we have one today who's going to explain what the WFH and WTF stands for. But Demian, I love your WTF. It is our great pleasure to welcome to the Rise stage, Dr. Andrew Golding. He is the CEO of Pam Golding Properties, South Africa's leading residential and commercial property group. They have a network of over 300 offices in sub-Saharan Africa, as well as offices in the UK, Germany, Mauritius, and Seychelles. Importantly as well, they also facilitate property sales and residency in places like Spain and Portugal, and property sales in the US. He's got the perfect perspective to get a sense of, with all of us now very happy wearing pajama bottoms and no shoes when we're working, studying, and teaching, how is that affecting people's desire to go back to work? What does that mean for commercial space? What does that mean for homes? Do we have enough space? And if we can't holiday beyond our borders, what does that mean for holiday homes? Really interesting. Full disclosure, I'm going to be completely transparent. I have known, loved, and respected Andrew for 2 decades, and PGP is a former client of mine. The founder of PGP, Pam Golding herself, literally one of the most influential women influential people in my entire career. So Andrew, it's fabulous having you coming in, joining us from Cape Town. Welcome to the Rise stage.
Thank you very much. Lovely to be with you.
So your thoughts on the poll, sir?
So other than nothing, I would have answered all of those questions because I think that each of them has had an impact certainly on me. But I suppose if I had to choose one, it would be the ability to spend more time with family. As somebody who used to spend a lot of time in the pre-COVID world on and off a plane, it's been just fantastic not to have to commute and travel, and the flexibility that working from home has allowed has been great.
If I can follow up, Andrew, just with something you said, not being from the hospitality or travel industry per se, a personal question. Of all that travel that you did pre-pandemic, what percentage do you think you are going to be able to continue to not do in the future? In other words, by how much will you reduce your business travel going forward?
So I think about 80% is a guess at the moment. So I am traveling again, and not nearly as much. It's all for business, but I think whereas in the past one would simply just default to getting on a plane and going to a meeting, now it's the opposite. You really think twice, and only if it is really important or urgent or necessary does one get on a plane. And so it's the exact opposite to what it was, in my opinion.
See, very interesting. Very different views from executives outside the industry from those within the industry. So I think this is a fascinating topic.
Absolutely. And again, because we've all been rewired in the last year that this is acceptable, this works. So why, and especially with companies not being able to find the budget or overtly be seen to be spending the money on travel. There's also the credibility issue. Andrew, when you and I met up in December in Cape Town, what really struck me about what you were saying about the property market was the fact that people, again, it's had a huge impact on residential and commercial. Can you just give us some top line stats of what has the impact been on residential and commercial property and why?
So I think one's got to put the sort of pre-COVID world into perspective from a South African real estate perspective. So pre-COVID, the market was fairly depressed, economy was taking strain, and there was a sense that the year ahead, so 2020, was going to be much like 2019, which was, at best, kind of a neutral market. COVID hit, everyone, reached for the playbook. There was no playbook. And one had to draw on a whole range of assumptions. I think most people felt that the market was going to get considerably worse, and that generally speaking, we needed to sort of hunker down for what might be 12 months or even longer of just hanging in there and trying to survive, which of course has been the case in many industries. But I think to everyone's surprise, the residential property market came out firstly based on some pent-up demand, which I think everyone expected, but then just has accelerated, and trade has been extremely brisk and has caught everyone by surprise. So the market has, I think, been fueled primarily by a very low historic interest rate environment here in South Africa, which has definitely catalyzed the market, but then some fairly fundamental and seemingly systemic trends, which have been prevalent around the world. So certainly the work from home phenomenon has been the one that I think has driven many of the purchasing decisions. And that has either manifested itself in, I need more space, I'm going to be working from home, my partner's going to be working from home, and my kids may well have to be studying from home, and we can't all work around the kitchen table. So we've got to make a plan. And that's either we need to acquire more space, or we need to develop more space, or we need to think about moving. And so that has also triggered, I think, a second systemic phenomenon, which is that suddenly families, couples, individuals have taken a step back post-COVID and said to themselves, well, actually, I can work from anywhere. So where would I like to live based on that? And that has then, I think, spawned a range of new and, in our view, structural purchasing decisions, which has completely changed the residential property market in South Africa. So, for example, pre-COVID, commuting times and distances were a critical purchasing consideration. Now, if you don't need to commute anymore, it's completely taken that off the table. Lifestyle considerations, as you mentioned earlier, have become really important. So we have seen Zoom towns, as you alluded to earlier, pop up all over the place. And those are historically second home or holiday towns or villages in South Africa and in African countries, where we're seeing people making primary first home decision purchasing considerations. And in addition to that, we've seen second home buying dramatically increase, where people have said, well, look, we're not really sure what's going to happen in the post-COVID environment, but for now, we're going to go and live in a second home destination because we can.
And what about international? Because if you look at the fact that South Africa, like many countries around the world, are second home locations for swallows, or effectively people who go and cross away from the weather. Borders have been shut. How has that impacted international property sales? Yeah,
so we've been most surprised at that. From an international perspective, a number of international clients have similarly said, well, if I can live and work anywhere, where do I want to live? Some people have said, well, Cape Town, as an example, has been a favorite destination of mine. I think I want to go and live there. Even though I can't get there right now, I'm assuming that at some point I will be able to get there. And so I'm going to look at the property market. It seems like the South African property market is a good purchasing option for me from a pricing point of view, because there seems to have been a repricing pre and post-COVID. And so we've been surprised at the number of international people who have bought properties, not quite sight unseen, because most of them have had some prior knowledge of our local market, but have nevertheless gone ahead and purchased properties that they haven't been able to inspect because they haven't been able to get here. And we think that that's going to be a trend, and again, a structural issue that I think is going to continue long into the future, where as a consequence of this new world we live in, people are going to say, I can in fact run my international business from Cape Town or from somewhere else in South Africa, notwithstanding the fact that it is located somewhere else in the world.
Stunning.
Andrew, I'm curious what you think in terms of, all right, people are making decisions now, buying a second home, moving more to the country, suburban, because this past year and maybe the next year or two could be impacted still by high COVID numbers. But looking longer term, what are the trends going on today that you think we will still see impacting the residential real estate market 5-10 years down the road? Would you be telling people to make investment decisions long-term based on what you've been seeing now, or you think we're going to revert back?
Yeah, so I think one can never say never, but when I refer to structural changes, that's what I'm referring to. I'm referring to changes that I think are here to stay. I think that a number of the trends were probably inching their way in this direction anyway pre-COVID, and COVID has just really, catapulted them and accelerated them to the extent that they now are tangible and kind of statistically significant. So I think all of the trends that I've mentioned are certainly here for the short-term future, and I think for the longer-term future. Whether people are going to, in the same sort of proportion, work from home and continue to prefer to work from home, I think is debatable. And your poll around people looking to want to have more engagement with their colleagues is certainly something we're experiencing in our business. And so I think we're going to find hopefully a happy medium between the kind of isolated world and then the non-isolated world. But from a residential point of view, our sense, certainly in terms of the research we've done, is that people are really preferring these structural changes that are taking place in the residential market, and therefore are likely to drive purchase decisions. So, an example is where a former business person based in, say, Johannesburg in South Africa makes a decision to move to what was formerly a seaside holiday home area, decides to go and live there, and then while they're there starts investing in a business, and suddenly they are actually invested in that area commercially, and so the probability of them returning to their former life is actually limited.
That's interesting. I never thought of that residential then yielding commercial purchase. What does this mean then for all that commercial purchase, all the commercial property? Because we know whether it's New York, London, all of these city centers, people are moving out because they want to get away from the city center and especially the commutes. Any indicators you're finding in terms of the impact there? Yeah,
so I think commercial developers and commercial landlords are considering all of the options. I think that pronouncing the death of office space, I think, is premature. There certainly is still going to continue to be offices and office space, but I do think that landlords are going to have to look at repurposing some space. And certainly in terms of the way that residential inner city and metro developments are going around the world towards micro apartments, towards smaller areas, I think that's going to continue. So I think we're seeing all of those trends happening in South Africa. But at this stage, I think it's too early to call it, because we haven't seen the extent to which people are going to go back to even repurposed office space, and the extent to which inner city living or metro living is going to evolve around this smaller apartment, co-working, co-living potential spaces. But one thing that does seem for sure is that the requirement around commuting and transport is something that's not going to be as important as it was previously.
Indeed, indeed. Demian, looks like we've got some viewers who are keen to get in on the conversation.
All right, Sarah, why don't you give us a first question?
Yes, Sven asks, which you've covered a bit, but are you seeing much real estate repurposing for co-living? And do you think that co-living is here to stay?
Yes, so I think certainly in terms of a global phenomenon, without a doubt, from a South African perspective, the co-living, the brave developers who've gone into the co-living space it's early days, and COVID kind of hit just at the time where it was starting to get some foothold. I think that affordability for first-time home owners and tenants is an issue across the world, and the co-living environment certainly provides, I think, an easy transition from full-out renting into kind of co-ownership and co-living. And I think that's going to be a requirement around what is still an increasingly expensive purchase as a first-time home owner. And so I do think it is, again, an example of a structural trend that is going to be here for the immediate term. The extent to which it's going to kind of dominate metro environments and inner city living environments, I think, still remains to be seen.
But you make a good point, though, Andrew, that at least it's getting people into the buying market for the first time. Yep. So it's sensitizing in that regard, which 2-3 years and now will yield return.
Yeah.
Great. Sarah, we got another question?
Yes. Emma asks, what do you think luxury living will look like in the future?
Yeah, so the luxury living space is a really interesting one as it's evolving. I think, we're seeing on the one hand people looking to try and create communities of luxury living, either on their own or in so-called estates, which provide for a total work, live, play experience. But I think in terms of the sort of ultra luxury living phenomenon, we're going to continue to see an evolution of again an all-in-one home experience, where if you didn't want to, you wouldn't have to leave your home, and you'd be able to live in complete luxury in your home with presumably a really exceptional site for that property. And we are seeing increasing numbers of high net worth individuals purchasing properties which are essentially there just for the site that they are buying, knocking those properties down, and then building the homes of their dreams, obviously where they can afford to do so.
But especially, Andrew, as well, from the point of view of countries around the world going into lockdown, open up, lockdown again, open up, lockdown again. That so many are finding, I mean, the number of friends that I've had that have just said their homes have been perfect for lockdowns because everyone is cramming around the dining room table. So the investment is not a short-term tactical one. It's a preventative one, especially when we keep hearing COVID-19 is not the end of this journey.
Yeah, so it seems like everyone needs to plan for uncertainty, and as a consequence, therefore, the living environment, I think, was always important, but is now of paramount importance. And we've certainly seen, across the board, so both from the property sector that I'm in terms of the transactional component of it, but also the building environment, where people have seen a significant increase in renovations, where people are saying, look, we might be in this for quite a while, and therefore we've got to make our homes the best they can be.
So like the panic room of the 1980s and 90s that everybody was building, now it's home offices. What else are people looking for in their homes that's transforming this building environment?
Yeah, so I think the multiple home office is certainly one of the things we're seeing where it's possible. Certainly recreation and living spaces, increases in recreation and living spaces where people have large families. That's certainly been a phenomenon. We've seen an increase in the number of tennis courts and swimming pools that people are putting in for the same reason. So, leisure at home is also something that from a South African perspective, we're seeing an increase of. Home gyms, given the situation around that environment, is also something we've seen an increase of. And then the sort of luxury toys around jacuzzis and spas and those sort of things, home spas, saunas, etc., are all, I suppose, in line with the same kind of thinking.
Do you think there'll be a movement towards multiple families building and buying in the same little area so they can create their own bubbles for the future? Because we're seeing a little bit of that in the hotels where they want to create the whole idea of connecting rooms and adjacent rooms, creating wings. So 6 business people could meet for a week in a hotel and have their own wing of the hotel, not having to interact with other people, but able to interact with each other more easily. Is that something we're going to see residentially?
Yeah, so I think we've seen it already pre-COVID in terms of the kind of a South African phenomenon of so-called estates. So those are either residential golf estates or equestrian estates or even ecological estates. But certainly post-COVID, we've seen multiple families choosing to relocate from wherever they are and buy in a single estate, which allows them to know that they at least have the opportunity of being with each other and seeing each other without having to worry about COVID protocols and restrictions.
Especially multi-generational to that point.
And multi-generational, very much multi-generational.
I have a question for you, Andrew, because again, going into a bit of the backstory, you're a qualified doctor, you're a medic. And I've always felt that one of the things that's made you an exceptional leader is that not only do you have a brilliant business brain and you're gifted with an incredible mother, but you have a doctor's heart. And the trauma that was faced by everyone personally and professionally during COVID, especially the early months of just manic, what is going on? We've had a fascinating time this past year learning from leaders how they have had to cope and adjust their leadership style to be able to not just keep the business going, but keep the well-being of their people strong. How has being a doctor with a doctor's heart helped you navigate your team's ability to understand the needs and motivations of buyers to be able to unlock that new path?
Yes, so I think, having got over the first sort of wave of panic that I think everybody probably felt, there was a sense of, okay, well, we've got to knuckle down here and do what needs to be done. And my first instinct was really to try and figure out a way to keep in touch. So we have roughly 3,000 people in the organization. Everyone was, in the same kind of heightened emotional state of anxiety and uncertainty. And so the first thing that I did was really through Zoom was look to provide a platform for people to just connect and to have a sense of a kind of a common view of what was going on. Obviously, I was fortunate in that I was able to provide some medical insight into people to people. And at one stage, so I think the biggest Zoom meeting we had was about 800 people on at one time. And it turned from being a kind of a property meeting into a medical meeting. And I did feel that I was kind of very much had my doctor's hat on as opposed to my property hat. But it was just relevant at the time and people had more medical questions than property questions. So I think that was really an important step which allowed people to feel connected. I also introduced a weekly video which just really spoke about whatever was on my mind. And most of it wasn't property at that time, which again just allowed people to access, I suppose, what I was feeling and thinking at the time and gave them a sense of the point that we're all in this together. And I suppose that really helped. And then from a buyer and seller perspective, we really used the 3 months of lockdown to radically change our business. And again, it was in line with the trend that was already coming our way, and which is a global trend around automation and digitization and no paper. And we had to consider the prospect of having a business where we may not be able to physically engage with our clients, buyers and sellers. And so in the space of 3 months, we put together a process whereby if we needed to, we were going to be able to engage with buyers and sellers as an intermediary without having to ever physically be in contact with them. And it required a recalibration in people's minds of how that was going to be possible. Initially, there was a great deal of concern and anxiety that would never work because we are a business that is fundamentally based on engaging with people physically. But to our surprise, and I think, you know, to everyone's credit in the organization, they were able to adapt very quickly. And in fact, we did transactions where an agent had not met either the buyer or seller before, and were able to conclude a transaction in the lockdown environment through just engaging through the processes we put in place. So I think the lesson for me was just how incredibly adaptable we all are to the circumstances that we face whenever they hit us.
Especially considering it's such a high risk, high cost exchange for many people.
Yeah.
To have to do that virtually says a great deal about the trust and the credibility that's required. So, Demian, do you want to bring this one home? Pardon the pun.
No more questions? We'll stop there. All right, Andrew, look, for me, it's been really interesting to look at the parallels between hospitality and hotels and real estate, right? And some of the same trends that are impacting hotels, and that we're still grappling with and trying to figure out the long-term implications. How will people travel? What will they want in those places? Will there be big groups and events? It seems to be some of the same issues are affecting the real estate market, which makes complete sense. And I think Anita would disagree that she thinks everybody's going to bounce back and travel again. But your early statement about that 80% reduction is the number that I'm concerned about, because at that point, the hotels that cater to business and groups are going to really suffer a lot. So it'll be curious to see what of the behaviors we have from now continue going forward. So thanks for sharing your insights on that and your personal view on that as well.
Andrew, I'm incredibly grateful. Thank you for being with us. It was again one of those we never thought about that connection episodes. So thank you for that. I'm thrilled you were on the stage. Please take care of yourself, and huge love.
Thank you very much.
Bye, Andrew.
Bye.
I don't know, I talk to people in the industry and they say, oh, business travel is coming back. Groups are going to come back later, conventions. I talk to people outside the industry who don't have a vested interest, and they're reducing their travel 50%, 70%, 80% post-pandemic. When I say health is not an issue, no, we don't want to travel anymore. We don't want to commute anymore. I think people are underestimating the impact, not of the virus, but of the way we've changed as people and as societies. I think the industry, I almost think I have to stop teaching, because I have no idea how to help students see what's going to happen 5-10 years down the road. It's going to be so drastically different.
But I think what you're saying is so important, we've been saying this from the beginning, the value of travel and the values of travel have changed. So to your point, we have institutionalized virtual business meetings. So like Andrew was saying, unless it's for external transactional purposes, relationship building, this is completely acceptable. And people are, and I keep hearing it from people who've started to travel again, they're comfortable once they get to where they're going. It's the traveling process that's so unnerving, because it's so unknown and you could end up in a hotel quarantine. All of these little things are happening. So I agree with you. Business travel will suffer for quite some time. Leisure, because again, it's people have missed one another. But travel will come back, but differently, profoundly differently. There's no question about that. One thing I love about this conversation though, Demi, and it goes very much to what we've talked about, we can't separate, we are travelers. We are people who live in homes. We are people working from home. So it was one of those great topics where we can all relate non-professionally. So that was great. So.
And something we cannot relate on is our topic today for Grace. Total knockout. Grace, what are we debating today?
Thank you, Demian. Today you are debating, with travel rapidly reopening, will companies finally walk the sustainability talk? Anita, take it away.
I am saying yes for three main reasons. Firstly, prior to COVID, sustainability was about green. It was an option. It was about environmental protection, changing from plastic straws to bamboo or paper or whatever. Now the definition of sustainability has become understood. People recognize it's about economic sustainability, social, cultural, and environmental. We see the impacts on local supply chains. Also, that's critical, the definition of change. Secondly, it's no longer an option. Customers, whether they're buying products or they're travelers, are demanding sustainability be built into the model, that destinations are being able to help recover through travel. Communities are being able to be supported through travel. Water and resources are being managed through travel. Travelers want it, leaders want it, their staff are demanding it. So I think that's a really important part. Thirdly, it's recognizing, again, the demand side, the travelers, they're the ones saying, we want to see the proof now. Enough of the talking. You've been locked up for 15 months. Show the action when it comes to sustainability. And EHL's own insights are saying 2/3 of travelers want their choices to support destination recovery. More than half want to see the money going straight back to local communities. 53% are willing to pay more, and that's 13% more than last year. All of that is grounded in the fact that sustainability has changed as a definition, and those who don't talk about it, brands and businesses, are going to be penalized for it because people will simply not support them in their actions and in their purchases. Over to you.
Amen. Right? Because that was a prayer. I'm stealing that from a movie I saw. I'm stealing that from a movie I saw. No, I wish this was all true, and I want people to make sure they're saying, I'm all for this. I just don't think it's happening. I think, one, you said it, people want it. They want the companies to do it. When it comes to pay for it, they will not pay more for it. And the problem is, it is expensive to enact a lot of the sustainable practices that the world desperately needs. You've got, if we look at hotels, hundreds of thousands of hotels that would be too expensive now to drastically change. You can make cosmetic changes. Yes, we can get rid of the straw. Yes, we can change the light bulb. So great. But the serious moves that need to be made, including on the travel side, are expensive. People are not willing to invest in that because they can't pass that cost on to the consumer. So unless the government mandate it, right? And I agree, employees want it, customers want it, they just don't want to pay for it. If you tell employees, oh, we can do all this, but it's going to have to come a little bit out of your salary, they're not going to accept it. If you tell customers, yes, we can do all these things, you're going to have to pay 20 or 30% more, they're not going to accept it. So for me, the problem isn't that people want to do it. I think everybody would agree, almost everybody, we should do all these things. The problem is, we have not learned enough yet. We are not yet facing the crisis or recognizing that the crisis is at our door, that we have to do it. We're still going to think money first, especially this past year. Everybody, well, not everybody, but most of the travel and hospitality industries lost so much money, they don't have the resources to invest in serious sustainability now. I'm saying no.
I greatly appreciate your counter prayer. However, that's very past tense. Sustainability is not a cost, it's a saving. That's the interesting, hang on, let me finish. That's a saving, that's important. Food waste management, that's a savings, and that's just reducing wastage. Water management, electricity management, that's saving companies. There's no requirement needed, and that's what I find fascinating. Thirdly, community engagement, SME development, simply shifting business models. Cruise lines were doing this before to begin with, to say, don't import your products, use the local artisans, use the local communities, use the local supply chains. That's what I'm saying about the definition of sustainability. It's working now through supply chains to activate circular economies. That saves money, that doesn't cost money. So this is where, and for those who need the money to invest, green investments are becoming an imperative. Governments, financial institutions are insisting that if the request for loans, if funding requests are not weaving in green principles for community and environmental sustainability, you're not getting the money. So in 2019, I would agree with your arguments. Now, no, it's not a cost, it's a fundamental saving. Saving of money and saving of credibility, no question about it.
I mean, I will agree. We've been saying to firms, this is an investment, right? So you're going to invest in these practices and it's going to save you money. They still would not invest. And I just don't see that there's been enough of a reason for them yet to say, we're going to make these investments. We're going to take the short term, because those savings is usually longer term. So we're going to have this big outlay of cash to invest, and then we're going to save money over the time, right? Changing the entire energy policy of a building is expensive. And yes, over 20 years, we're going to save money on that. I look at the labor issue, right? Labor is a big part of the sustainability issue. Look at the way people are reacting to the way the industry has been treating them. No company has come up with new policies now and announced new policies, new minimum wage, new treatment for employees, new packages for them to help them through this crisis and going forward. So if we're not making that move on something that's so directly important to the industry, labor, why do we expect them to make these changes elsewhere? Okay, Grace, enough from the two talking heads.
Thank you. It is now time to choose your winner. Do you agree with Anita that it is no longer an option? The definition of sustainability is now understood and travellers want to see action. Sustainability is not a cost, it is a saving. Or do you agree with Demian? Just don't think it's happening, won't pay more for it. Problem is the crisis is at our door now and not ready to pay for it.
She's so good.
All right, let's see what people are going to think about this. There's clearly a right answer here.
I can't believe it. Ay.
Look, I think if we asked people, do you think firms should do this? We'd have 100%. 95% would agree with you that they should be doing this. I just think people are recognizing you're such an optimist and the dreamer, and the reality is just not there. Obviously, it's pretty close. I'm not going to declare victory here, but I think it's not a tough decision for firms. They know they have to do it, but to actually go out and say, okay, we're going to be very serious about this and not pass the cost on to customers and not pass the cost on to employees. Stuff shareholders want their returns. They don't care about what's happening 5 years.
And you said the word right up front, firms. Our industry is 80% SMEs. And even firms like Brett Tolman and the Travel Corporation, they had interventions to switch over to products that are going to be more sustainable. Someone has to start, and we have to start now. And the beauty of firms, they offer scale, but it has to start. So I'm very sad if people think that we're not going to walk the talk.
Oh.
Moving on, I'm still happy though, because we've got in 2 weeks' time a great executive in residence, Fred Dixon, President and CEO of New York City and Company. And it being New York and the 5 boroughs around it, it's going to be a brilliant conversation because it goes exactly, Demian, to so much we've been talking about today and your headline. So please do join us on the 24th of May for Cities on the Rise, ? With the President CEO of New York City and Company joining us, probably in his pajamas as well. In the meantime, please do join us online. We've got, as always, all of our blogs come out every other week it's the Rise and Shine blog. You can find it on on rise-weekly.com, our website. It's there with all our past episodes from year number 1 and moving into year number 2 as we build up towards season 4. Send us an email on what you want to see in season 4. We're really keen to know. We're excited that the desire for Rise is still there. Keep everyone posted on what you want. We are here for you as always. Thank you for joining us. And for those of you who are ending Ramadan this week, a very loving Eid Mubarak. Enjoy your family celebrations. As always, a huge thanks to the Wizards of Oz and to you, Demian, and to everyone who's joined us from around the world. Thank you. Please stay safe, stay home, stay hopeful, keep your hands clean, and stay with Rise. Over to you, sir.
Don't really have much more to add to that other than thank you everybody for being with us. Thank you again, Andrew, for that. Happy anniversary to my wife, Veronique, and good luck with your exams to my daughter, Nicole.